Hi, and welcome to Good News on the Ground. And I'm your host, the Reverend Lisa Work, here with my co-host,
the Reverend Bradley Mattson.
And in an interesting turn of events for this month, instead of me being the host, I'm going to be the guest and interviewee.
And we figured it would be awkward for you to interview yourself. So
it's been done before.
I'm delighted to be here with you and ask you these really good questions about, the work that you're doing and sharing the good news in your pastoral ministry as rector of a church. There's so many different ways that we tell the good news, right? And here you are serving as the rector of a church. You are a pastor to people. And not only are you proclaiming the good news, you are modeling how that good news is proclaimed in your community in a parish setting. And I suspect many of the listeners are either responding to a pastor or are pastors themselves, and they're going to love to hear about what you're doing at your parish up there in Danville.
Sure.
And I have to tell you, it's a neat moment for me to be here, because I remember when you were installed as rector of that parish, and what an exciting time that was for you, and for the whole church in following your journey. Tell me about CMEC Minute. Tell us all about that. Tell me what you're doing up there in Danville, and what it's about for you. Why are you doing it?
So it's even more interesting, Bradley, because I met you in Danville many, many years ago before I even knew I was going to be a priest.
That's right.
When we were on a learning weekend, I was in discernment, right? And so exactly, I'm a priest here in Danville, Pennsylvania, the rector of Christ Memorial Episcopal Church. And when I started here, I learned pretty quickly as I got to know the folks in our congregation. They had lots of questions for me. I was the new person, the new priest. It wasn't like they haven't had priests before, but I used to be a teacher. So part of my wiring is that I like to teach and help people learn. And so we started having interesting questions about the liturgy, or about why do we do what we do? Why do we do this? Why do we do that? And it was not just inside the parish, although that's where it started, answering questions of folks who went to church here. And we thought, how could I answer some quick questions? And in a minute, CMEC Minute. So the goal is to do it under 60 seconds, which is a challenge. It's a challenge depending on the topic.
Sure.
And so we each week, gosh, when did I start it? It was around Easter, Palm Sunday this year. And I found some questions. We had questions about the liturgical year. Why do we change the colors of the paraments and the vestments? And so it started out that way. And I thought, well, this is kind of an easy way. And we decided to put it out on social media. And suddenly we find that we get other people, not just people from our parish, watching it, which is kind of exciting. And we also discovered the questions that folks within my parish were asking. Sometimes they were asking that question because they had family or friends and they didn't know how to answer it. So then this became a tool that I could give them to then use with their family or friends. So you see how it begins to multiply forward?
That's phenomenal. And I suspect, your educator's heart, right? Your teacher's heart.
Yeah.
Just want people to know the why behind the way, the why behind the way. And I think in unearthing that, you probably answered questions for people that maybe they didn't know they had, or they weren't comfortable voicing. Yeah, that's right. Why do we return to green for ordinary time and Epiphany times, but feast days are white, and why is Pentecost red? Those are exciting and fun things to answer, and it's the depth of meaning, which I think is so cool. But I love how you answering this for your own community then amplified the answers to questions and seeking beyond the community. So how does answering a question about the color on the church's altar become sharing the good news? Like how does it translate to the E word of evangelism? Like, where have you seen that?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of our folks either grew up Episcopalian, or we had actually a large number of folks who grew up Catholic as well.
Okay.
And so we have a lot of similarities, right? We share some things, and they didn't know the whys. And so when they would talk to people, they didn't have the answer for the whys. It's just because that's what we do. Or other folks said, I never knew why we changed the colors. I didn't know what they meant or what the liturgical seasons were. I mean, I kind of hear it, and they could name Christmas, they could name Advent, they could name Lent, they could name Easter and Passion Week, right?
Sure.
But other than that, they're like, well, I don't really know why. And so it started with the liturgical seasons. We love Anglican prayer beads here. And so we have a group of folks who like to make them, and they're gifts that we give. And they're also things that we use as a way to share the good news. So we have a hospital here, in a teaching hospital. And when the residents come in town, the whole town welcomes the new residents. So we gave out, well, if they wanted, some Anglican prayer beads and little tiny Jesuses. Of course, I don't have any handy real by, but little tiny Jesuses, because everybody needs a little Jesus.
Everybody needs a little.
But what we discovered is that we needed to share how to use those Anglican prayer beads. Well, not everybody knew how to do them. So again, this became a tool.
Discovery, learning.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I don't know. And so we had a little QR code on the brochure that we gave out with the prayer beads, so people could scan it and go to a CMEC Minute to learn how to use them, and then learn about our church and come to visit us. So again, it became this tool. Maybe it's like old school pamphlets. I don't know. I didn't think about it that way, but till now.
It's really interesting, yeah, when you think about that, because, how did prior generations receive and send out information, and how do generations do it now? We have different mediums, right? We don't have the old gospel tracts, and that's really not the way that we tend to work anyway in our storytelling. You're seeking, you're naming, and you're celebrating the way God is at work, and then inviting people to that. That may or may not be with a door knocker anymore. Or it may be, but clearly you're connecting that with the use of media and inviting them to see the Minute, and then they know who the people behind the CMEC Minute, and then they can learn about how God is working in that community.
1 minute. So it's a really low amount of time to invest, 1 minute. And we had also, out of those prayer beads, became questions about prayer and what is prayer, and answered prayer. So then we did a CMEC Minute on prayer and what it means.
So that's a crossover, and then it translated to a spiritual practice, which is, in this case, prayer.
Exactly. Other questions that we've had is, what does the real presence in communion mean? What does that mean?
That's a good one.
So we had the conversation about what does that mean? And so then it's also this teaching tool that we can go back to. And this is where I'm going to rely on you. Which part of the evangelism definition, Bradley, does that hit? But it becomes a teaching tool. We go back and we revisit it. We had lots of questions about, well, what about the vessels in communion? So people who are not familiar with our particular tradition and they're curious, again, it's an easy way to check us out without having to necessarily come into our church doors, but they can check a few things out before they get here.
But when you're talking about those kinds of things, you're presenting those outward visible signs. You get people to think about, well, what does it mean for God to be present in a particular way, in a particular place, while also being present to all of us all the time? Right.
And that it's not some cosmic chemistry, or physics thing that happens.
Sure. Right. That really is it transcends all of that, right? And I don't know about you, I think people have all of these kinds of questions all the time. The question is, how does society or the culture answer them versus how might we answer them?
And how can we make some of these tools accessible to people? People who are Episcopalian curious or following Jesus curious, they're seekers and they're not sure. So the purpose of it is just a really easy, low key, for people to check us out. It's not scary, right? It's not like you have to come knock on the door of my church. You don't have to come knock on my office door, but you can kind of check us out and find out some of the other questions we have on the list are, why even follow Jesus? I haven't figured out how to make that in 1 minute yet. So I'm open to
Cliff notes on fine. Well, I'd say that you probably just named a challenge.
Yeah.
Which really is, this is going beautifully for you. And I'm so excited about the way that it's engaging your own church, but also the community beyond. I mean, that's wonderful. And for anybody with an internet connection now hearing about it, how do you give the hard truths a soft landing, right? How do you get the big things condensed down? That's a challenge. What are some of the challenges that you ran into?
That's a great question. Great. And I've had them. Sometimes what might be interesting to me, a topic that might be interesting to me to put out for a CMEC Minute, might not be it. So it's content. So we really want people to let us know, what do they want? Like, we even have an opportunity, a place where people can submit CMEC Minute. I'd like to know more about. So tell us what you want to know more about. What you see in the 1 minute is not just a one take. It probably takes me 45 minutes-ish to maybe a little more, to just record and edit and get out that 1 minute. Sometimes maybe an hour and a half or so to, depending on the topic, condense it down to 1 minute, get it out, record it. And so I'm all of those things right now. One of the things we are doing is an exciting thing. We just started a little confirmation class. We call it Thresholds. And so they are asking me questions that would be good. And so they're going to help do some of the recording and be some of my guests on the CMEC Minute. But that's because it's all me and I don't want it to be all Lisa. I think that's a challenge for anything when it comes to evangelism. You don't want it to be a one-person show, right? It needs to be invite the community in.
You're inviting others to learn about more.
Yeah.
And I imagine that's a challenge too. Not everyone is an invitation maker. Not everyone is like, hey, let's. So I imagine that could be a challenge too. But I think this medium, what I'm learning about it is that it's low key and it's accessible.
Low key. That's probably it. Low key. That's
low
it.
Key, accessible, and that's good.
Yeah.
Good.
And it's not supposed to be theologically something for deep theologians. However, it is. I guess maybe it's both and, isn't it? It doesn't, you don't have to be a deep theologian to watch it and learn something. It's made for everybody. And I think that's what good communication is, something that everybody can grasp, not just those who have, deep philosophical, theological backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. So I would say what are you learning from this work? It always strikes me, also a rector of a parish myself, how much I pick up when I'm working to teach others something new. What I pick up when I'm learning as I prepare for a sermon or a Bible study or even this podcast, because I think that opens everybody's hearts. If they know that the person that's sort of putting things together is also learning just as much and needs it just as much. We all need Jesus.
Absolutely.
What have you learned about ministry or yourself or people? What's been insightful? What's been a sparkling new thing that you've picked up in this work?
Great question. I think one of the prayer in particular, the one CMEC Minute I did on prayer, it required me to really think about, what do I think about prayer and why do we pray? What is the purpose of prayer? And I had to answer all of those questions myself, where I thought I had a pretty good handle on it. But when I needed to package it to get it down to 1 minute, I had to think about that. What is the most important thing I want to explain? And that solidified my commitment to prayer in the process of communicating to others. Wow, this is what prayer means. And it invites me also to revisit back, in particular with prayer. So when my prayers don't get answered the way I would like them to be answered, how do I respond? And it's opened to great questions with some of my parishioners, like after we've, talked about it. And when they say, and I have a sister-in-law that I'm praying for, or I have a friend, and I showed them this video because I didn't have all the words, but now I have a better way to say it. So that, I think that has taught me it sometimes we believe things, or we have our own personal beliefs, but being able to articulate what those mean, it's harder, right? Sitting with it for a little bit and having to really distill it down to be able to communicate it well. And I suspect maybe that's why people feel a little uncomfortable about evangelism in general. Do you think?
Sure, absolutely. Because I think we need to, in the work, we have to discover the grace when things don't go as planned, right? When there's a curveball, or when you're kind of sitting there and you're thinking, gosh, I was all set to invite somebody to this, or invite them to consider this, or welcome them into the church, or just whatever it might be. Right. And it doesn't go as planned. And how do you discover grace? How do you pivot? And how do you
know that the Holy Spirit is with you through all of that? I think that's key.
Right, because then we don't have to manage our own intensity here, because it's just because God is doing this work, right? We're just in it, and we're celebrating it, and we're naming it, and we're seeking it out.
Exactly.
And that's low key.
Well, and then to pivot back to the purpose of not CMEC Minute, but of this podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to show that it doesn't have to be this magnificent big program. Although we've already done a few of those amazing programs that are out there, which is awesome. But sometimes people see that and they're like, "Oh yeah, I can't do that. That's too big."
Right.
And to invite people to know that it can be small, and it's just as important as the big program is. Right?
I think that's important too, because it's meaningful and it's manageable.
Right.
And so I'll ask you a question about this that may be a bit of a curveball, but
great, thanks.
What's next? What's next for the work of the good news? What's next for CMEC Minute? What's the next question? Can you give us a sneak peek? Remind us to tune in. What are you going to cover next? What are you looking forward to in this ministry before we say our goodbyes for next time?
Well, that's a good question, little curveball. My friend Brad, I can always depend on that. My what's next is we're actually, as we work through, even whether it be the lectionary, or Brad and I were talking beforehand, our church is doing a Bible study. We're kind of getting the whole story, journeying through the Bible using a book called The Path. And I'm discovering is that the conversations we have in those, people want to talk to their friends about it. But again, they want a little bit of a launching pad. And I'm thinking, wow, maybe as I'm trying to discern what is the CMEC Minute, maybe some of the times a little lectionary, a CMEC Minute might be a little lectionary overview, or something that we're studying through the path. It's just a way to have conversation. But people, I'm discovering, is that even folks who don't attend our church, they're curious. And these are little things that kind of like, even our nuns, our nuns in town that I've run into, they're curious. Well, then why do you do this?
Sure.
Because this is why I think I'm not interested. This is why I want to be a nun, and not nun, N-U-N, but N-O-N-E. For those of you who, I don't want to even say I'm spiritual. I just want to say I have none.
Yeah.
But I'm finding that when I talk to those folks in town, and when some of our parishioners talk to those folks, they have curiosity, and they do want to find out. So I'm discerning as we go. I think I'm trying to hold it lightly. I don't know about you, but holding it lightly is a gift that I don't always have.
Yeah.
And that, I like to have a plan and execute the plan. Bradley knows that about me. I like a plan and execute the plan.
And we rely on that.
However, I also know the beauty of holding something lightly, and being able to pivot because we hold it lightly, being able to pivot because we're not so attached. This is a very design thinking thing, which is what I used to teach. Hold it lightly and to see what is it that the people need, because design thinking is about what do the people need, And how do you, Jesus was the epitome of design thinking. What do the people need? And how do you give it to them, what they need? And sometimes they don't even know they need it, but Jesus could see that they needed it and give it to them. And I think that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, it sounds like it's really going well, and it's been quite a journey of discovery and self-discovery, and what a neat and new thing you have been able to introduce the community to. And I can't wait to continue to follow it. So tell the folks who are listening that may not be familiar with CMEC Minute, when are they going to catch the next one before we get out?
Well, typically every Thursday. So if you go to our CMEC YouTube channel, and we'll put a link in the notes, you can see usually every Thursday or Friday. Now, they've been a little less because of vacation that I had, but they will be back. Every Thursday or Friday, you can see a new CMEC Minute, and then there's always a place that you can send us your questions. So this is not just for Christ Memorial Episcopal Church. This is for anybody who wants to, explore faith in 60 seconds.
So send your questions and tune in for Christ Memorial Episcopal Church CME Minute. Reverend Lisa Work, thank you so much for allowing me to interview you in this particular edition of Good News on the Ground. And why don't you lead us out? You've got the nicer glasses. I think that.
Well, they do kind of sparkle.
That's your honor. By all means, lead us out.
Well, and before I lead us out, let me just invite everybody who's watching. We have some exciting guests coming up in the next few months. We're not going to tell you. We're going to bait you, right? But you will not be disappointed, will they? We have some pretty amazing guests coming. Bradley and I are super excited to have them. And once a month, we'll be putting out one of these episodes. And in the meantime, don't forget that the good news is already on the ground, and you're part of the story, because evangelism is not about pressure. It's about presence and practice and promise. God bless.
God bless you all. See you next time.